Let's talk about a puzzle. Picture a U.S. federal agency with a budget that's bigger than the FBI's and the DEA's combined, but at the same time, it's constantly being accused of operating outside the law. Today, we're digging into the power, the politics, and the paradox of Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or as you know it, ICE.
Welcome to another explainer by SenseTalking. It's an ice-cold world.
So first, let's just wrap our heads around the scale we're talking about. ICE gets more than $12 billion a year. Think about it this way. That is more money than the FBI and the Drug Enforcement Administration get put together. That's a staggering amount of taxpayer money. And that brings us to the real head-scratcher, the core question of this explainer. If it's so well-funded, why do the sources we're looking at describe the agency as a menace? How can one government body get so much money and so much criticism all at once? Let's get into it. To figure this out, we've got to go back to the beginning. See, ICE hasn't always been the agency that it is today. Its origin story and how its mission has changed over time, well, that's our first big clue. Just look at this timeline. It shows the incredible political whiplash this agency has been through. It was born after 9/11 under the Bush administration, with a real focus on national security. Then the Obama administration came in and narrowed that focus to felons, not families. Then came a huge shift under the Trump administration, which expanded ICE's job to target pretty much any undocumented immigrant. And now the Biden administration is trying to adjust priorities again in the middle of all of it. This constant shifting is absolutely key to understanding what ICE has become.
Okay, so that's the official mission. But a mission on paper is one thing. What about the culture inside the agency? The sources we've looked at argue that something really profound has changed internally.
Just listen to this quote from the analysis. It claims the culture is becoming more like a paramilitary group than a regular law enforcement agency. It even says some of the behavior is like street gangs. What that's really getting at is a shift toward a more aggressive, more autonomous culture, where loyalty inside the group can start to matter more than following the letter of the law. So you might be asking, how does a culture like that even start? Well, according to the sources, a huge part of the answer is quotas. We're talking about informal pressure to hit certain numbers and even a reported daily arrest quota of 3,000 people. Now, when your main goal is just hitting a number, you start to reward aggressive tactics, and things like legal details or humanitarian concerns can get pushed aside. This is what leads to collateral arrests, basically sweeping up people who weren't even the original targets just to make the numbers. And this is where it all stops being about abstract policies and starts being about real people. Because an aggressive mission and a culture driven by quotas, well, that doesn't just exist in a report. It has a massive impact on people's lives, and even on America's relationships with other nations. Okay, look at this. This is one of the most jarring disconnects. On paper, legally, these detention centers are just administrative holding facilities. They are not supposed to be prisons. It's civil confinement, not criminal. But the reality described in the sources, it's a completely different world. It's described as a prison-like environment where suffering is actually part of the policy, used to deter others. And to make this really concrete, the source material tells us about a man named Daniel. Now, Daniel was a lawful permanent resident, a green card holder, and had been in the U.S. since he was a kid. He owned his own small business, but he was detained and eventually deported because of an old minor drug charge. His story really shows how the harshness of the system can push people, even people who have a strong legal right to be here, to just give up and deport themselves. And this impact isn't just felt inside the U.S. The sources point out that when you detain and deport foreign nationals who actually have valid legal status, think students or workers, it creates serious problems with other countries. South Korea is mentioned as a specific example of an ally that has protested these actions. All right. We've looked at the history, the internal culture, and the real-world costs. Now let's pull all these threads together to finally answer that central question we started with. What's with the $12 billion? The analysis suggests it works in a cycle, kind of like this. Step 1. You frame immigration as a national crisis. Step 2. You use that to create public fear. Step 3. Funding ICE then becomes this very visible way for politicians to show they're being tough. And step 4, the bottom line, looking tough becomes more important than whether the policy is actually working. The funding is driven by political appearances, not necessarily by results. And that brings us to the core conclusion from the source material. That massive budget keeps going not because the agency is super efficient, but because it's a very powerful tool for political theater. It's a way for politicians to look like they're in control of a really complicated issue. So, why does any of this matter beyond immigration? Well, the sources argue it hits at something much more fundamental: the rule of law. And that's just the bedrock idea that everyone, and especially the government, has to follow the rules, that the law applies to us all. The big worry here is that when you have a government agency that can take away someone's liberty with very limited oversight from the courts, well, that starts to chip away at that core principle. It creates a system where the government's incredible power isn't fully held in check. Which leaves us with this final, very provocative question from the sources. It pushes us to think beyond just policy and instead about the basic balance between security and liberty. What does it really mean to uphold the principles of a democracy? There is absolutely no easy answer to that, but it's for sure a question worth thinking about.